We obviously don't live in an ideal society, so we have to ask, will that charge stick? Will a jury nullify those charges as well? And if not, what kind of sentence do you think the liberal female judge will hand down? If you do a show like this long enough, inevitably there are stories that end up resurfacing over the years. And yeah, occasionally there's a reason to revisit some of my old monologues, if you can believe it. And when this happens, it's never a good thing. In fact, it's usually because some horrible disaster has occurred. And we spent several shows talking about the imminent risk of a mid-air collision at low altitude, for example. And then after that military helicopter crashed into an American Airlines jet, all of a sudden, those old shows became relevant again. And today is yet another one of these moments. Now, we have to revisit an old episode because a horrible tragedy, one that was extremely painfully preventable, has occurred. So I'm going to play a short excerpt from my opening monologue back in September of 2023. Here's the background. I was talking about the killing of a 17-year-old white high school student in Akron, Ohio, named Ethan Lyman. In the summer of 2022, Lyman and his friends decided to harass random people with a toy gun that shot water pellets. In particular, Lyman and his friends shot water pellets at 3 black men between the ages of 19 and 21 who were playing basketball, including a man named Deshaun Stafford. And initially, the 3 men thought they were under attack, started to run away. But eventually, the 3 men, apparently realizing that there was no actual imminent threat threat to them, ran back towards Lyman. And once they caught up to him, Deshaun Stafford brutally beat and stomped Ethan Lyman to death. This was not a case of self-defense. Okay, at this point, they were well past the point where they knew this was not a real gun; it was water. And they're stomping on him, and it's a pretty good indication if you're stomping on someone on the ground. That means it's not self-defense, because that means they're on the ground. Lyman was found with blood coming out of his ears and nose. There was a shoe print on his chest. And on top of that, Stafford and his friends stole Lyman's car and fled the scene after Lyman was dead. Now, prosecutors initially brought murder charges, but they later decided to reduce the charges to involuntary manslaughter and assault after one of the prosecutors said that Lyman had died in a case of, quote, hood justice, meaning Ethan Lyman had it coming. So, notice what's happening here. 3 black men brutally executed a white 17-year-old, not because of self-defense, but just because they were mad at him. They were just mad. They wanted to make a point. And there were obvious reasons to suspect that the race of the victim contributed to the brutality of the killing. But instead of talking about that, prosecutors used race to absolve the killers of responsibility. Oh, they were just dispensing hood justice. Clear implication is that the white kid had it coming, because this is how justice works in black neighborhoods like this, apparently. Then at trial, the jury, again presumably for racial reasons, failed to convict Deshaun Stafford on involuntary manslaughter. And in the end, he was only convicted for assault. And here's what I said at the time for context. This week, Ethan Lyman's killers got off with a conviction for assault. That's it. They were acquitted of involuntary manslaughter. It's as if they just got into a nasty bar fight or something. They stomped somebody to death, and all they're getting is an assault charge. Conviction, rather. So they'll almost certainly be out of jail within 2 years, if not sooner. This is jury nullification encouraged by prosecutors. There's no other term that you can use to describe this. Now, I referred to this verdict as jury nullification, but actually it was worse than that. The prosecutors decided not to retry any of the other defendants on the involuntary manslaughter charge, even though they could have done so. So the prosecutors effectively endorsed the jury's decision to convict Deshaun Stafford and his co-defendants for assault. As I predicted at the time, Stafford ended up spending less than 2 years in prison. Specifically, he spent the 6 months of his sentence in a halfway house and was fully released in December of 2024. But his freedom didn't last long. This summer, he was arrested once again. And shortly afterwards, he had another criminal conviction on his record. This is from a report in Yahoo News from the beginning of this month. Quote, 2 brothers who were convicted of assault charges in the beating death of an Akron teen in the I Promise school parking lot has been convicted of new felony charges. Deshaun Stafford was sentenced to probation this week for a drug charge. Stafford, 23, was at a party on June 29th when he was approached by an officer while dancing in the street. The officer found cocaine in his pocket. Judge Mary Margaret Rowlands placed Deshaun on probation for 6 months on October 1st. Now, this is the judge in question, for what it's worth. And for our audio podcast listeners, she's exactly what you would expect her to look like, which is to say she's a woman, because in so many of these cases, as we've seen. It just so happens, coincidentally, that in so many cases where they let these violent thugs out, these are female judges. Not always, but so often. Look, I'll be honest with you, between work, kids, all the different activities you have with kids and trying to squeeze in some fishing time as well, very important. Our family dinners become a lot more chaotic than we prefer. And that's why I'm actually excited about what Good Ranchers is doing this fall. They're challenging families to get back to the table every Thursday night through Thanksgiving. And before you roll your eyes thinking this is some impossible Pinterest mom fantasy, hear me out. Good Ranchers delivers 100% American meat raised on local farms right to your door. Here's the game changer for busy families. Everything comes pre-portioned and triple trimmed. That means less time wrestling with a chunk of beef and more time actually sitting down together. I used to think you could only get a really great steak at an expensive steakhouse, but Good Ranchers delivers that same quality right to your door, right to my door. And I love their steaks. Now I can impress my family on the grill without dropping $100 every time that we eat out. Plus, they're doing weekly giveaways for a free holiday ham. Just post your Thursday dinner on Instagram with back to the table, hashtag back to the table, and tag Good Ranchers. It's easy, and who doesn't like a chance to win free food? I know I do. Here's the deal. Go to goodranchers.com and use my code Walsh for $40 off plus free meat for life when you subscribe. That's $40 off and free meat for life. Goodranchers.com. Let's get back to the table. She gave Deshaun Stafford probation with no prison time after he was caught with cocaine immediately after getting out of prison for killing someone. Now, make no mistake about it, the judge knew exactly what she was doing. She knows that people who commit a crime, any crime, are dramatically more likely than the general population to commit violent crimes in the future. With each crime they commit, that likelihood increases exponentially. That's especially true when you're talking about serious crimes like violent assault and cocaine possession. If we went back to 3-strike laws, something like 50% of all violent crime would vanish overnight. So the only reason not to throw the book at somebody like Deshaun Stafford is because you want him to commit more crime and destroy even more lives. And indeed, in a matter of weeks, that's exactly what Deshaun Stafford did. He killed yet another young white victim. Watch.
A man who served time in connection to the death of an Akron high school student has now been charged for his connection to shooting and killing an innocent bystander. Deshaun Stafford is facing several charges, including murder in the deadly shooting of Timothy Hutchinson. Police say Hutchinson was caught in the crossfire earlier this month in Highland Square. Investigators believe Stafford shot at a man who then fired back, hitting Hutchinson. The other suspect has been arrested, facing separate charges. Stafford was released earlier this year after serving time for an assault charge in the death of 17-year-old Ethan Liming back in 2022. Liming died from a head injury during a fight with Stafford and his brother after Liming and his friends shot gel pellets at them while they were playing basketball outside the I Promise school in Akron. News 5's Bob Jones spoke with Hutchinson's father earlier this month. He told us his son loved to fish and camp, and he had graduated from the University of Akron just last spring with a degree in mechanical engineering, and he was working in Worcester.
So this is essentially a felony murder charge, as best I could tell. Deshaun Stafford started shooting at someone, and in self-defense, that person shot back and accidentally hit 25-year-old Timothy Hutchinson, who was an innocent bystander. But because he started the shootout, Stafford is being charged for Hutchinson's murder because he is 100% responsible. He is the murderer here. Now, in an ideal society, that would be the end of the story. But we obviously don't live in an ideal society, so we have to ask, will that charge stick? Will a jury nullify those charges as well? And if not, what kind of sentence do you think the liberal female judge will hand down? What's your best guess? 5 years, 10? After killing his second person, how many? Now, personally, I predict 8 years or so at most. When Deshaun Stafford finally kills someone that the system cares about, meaning not a white guy, that's when he'll face serious lifelong consequences and not a moment sooner. That's because, as it's currently set up, our justice system, this is the way it works. Our justice system will basically spot you one murder, as long as you're in the right demographic. If you're in the right demographic and you are an official codified victim, according to the way the system works, which is to say you're anything but a white guy, then they'll give you one. Like, you can kill one person with no significant penalty. After you kill your second, and it's guaranteed you will, then they'll think about maybe putting you away for a decade or two. This is literally how the system works, and it's total madness. Every other day we hear about people getting killed because the government, in the name of equity, decided not to enforce the law. Remember this crash from last week? You can see it on the screen. A 21-year-old illegal migrant from India drove an 18-wheeler in to stop traffic on the freeway in California, didn't even attempt to hit the brakes, killed 3 people, seriously injured several others. The driver, Jashanpreet Singh, entered this country illegally in 2022, but instead of deporting him, the Biden administration let him stay. Now several people are dead, including 76-year-old Clarence Nelson and 69-year-old Lisa Nelson. Now, Singh has been charged with vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated and driving under the influence, and those sound like serious charges, but as an illegal alien, Singh is obviously entitled to preferential treatment, which with how things work now. So with that in mind, how long until a California judge lets him loose? Without informing ICE, of course. How long until Singh is driving his 18-wheeler again? How long until he slaughters more victims? 5 years? Less? At a certain point, we have to decide how long we're going to allow our communities to be held hostage by these barbarians. No one should get a mulligan after killing another human being or invading our country or committing any other serious crime. When I did a show on Ethan Liming back in 2023, I received more than a few comments about how Ethan Liming was in the wrong and had it coming for shooting the toy gun at those 3 black men. And these people criticized me for assuming the worst about Deshaun Stafford. Well, guess what? Sometimes assuming the worst is the right approach. Sometimes it saves the lives of innocent people. And the possibility of saving an innocent person is infinitely more important than showing kindness to criminals or giving them the benefit of the doubt or giving them a second chance. The deaths of Timothy Hutchinson, Clarence Nelson, and Lisa Nelson were horrible, yes, but they were also extremely predictable and preventable. And it's time we start preventing them. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.